Welcome, Life Sciences. Welcome to another exciting life science lesson. Today we're going to do a bit of a revision exercise. So we've looked at the whole gaseous exchange system, we looked at all the concepts, and we're going to have a quick recap, and we're going to put in a few questions, exam type questions, test type questions, right? Maybe just of common things that to help you with your studies and with your exams and with your tests. Okay, so if we have a look at what we're looking at, we're recapping the whole of the section that we've looked at. I'm not going to go through it now, we're going to go through it each section at a time. You can see the work behind me on the board, what the different sections are, and as we go through each one, I hope that, whoa, okay, I remember that, all of them, all the memories are going to come back again, and you're going to be able to remember all the work that we have looked at. Right, the first concept that was really important when we started with was terminology and understanding the difference between the following. I've put them here as keywords on the board, and I'm actually going to go to the next slide. And those keywords are actually really important in understanding the definition. We've done cellular respiration, and now we're looking at gaseous exchange. Very often we get these three terms, all right, confused. Please remember that cellular respiration is when we are going to make energy, right? We take glucose and we have oxygen, and we're going to make energy. We're breaking down, it is a catabolic process where we break down the glucose and release energy. These two concepts are very similar, but they are different, right? Breathing, right, involves muscles. It's the active part of where we bring oxygen into the body. Remember, I say body, all right, and carbon dioxide out of the body. We're going to use lungs. And gaseous exchange occurs across an exchange surface. So here where we had oxygen and carbon dioxide coming in, here we have a barrier. There's a surface over here. Oxygen must move in one direction, and carbon dioxide must move in the opposite direction. And in doing so, we're going to exchange gases. Now, this was a very important concept that you have to look at throughout the whole of the series. And this basically means that we have a respiratory surface. And what do we mean by that is, as I say to you, there is a layer, right? Oxygen must go one side and carbon dioxide must cross that layer. Now, that is our respiratory surface. And when we look at that, we must find how efficient is it. We need to get oxygen in as quickly as possible, carbon dioxide out as quickly as possible. This is, as I said, this is the human one, this is squamous epithelium, and we need to make sure that diffusion, which is the movements of gases, can occur very quickly and very easily. Now, each time that we looked at, we looked at different kinds of organisms in gaseous exchange. And when we look at the human gaseous exchange, structure and function always must go hand in hand. An efficient structure for an efficient function. So when we look at the requirements for an efficient gaseous exchange, and as I said to you, it's really important. You need to think about what happens if I can't get oxygen in, and what happens if I can't get oxygen out? So what happens if I can't breathe? And you need to think at it from that side. So when I talk about efficient, I mean I need to do it quickly, and I need to do it as efficiently as possible. We looked at the following things: a large surface area, right? So it must have a really large surface area. The greater the surface area, the more oxygen, all right, I can get in, and also the more carbon dioxide I can get out. The surface area must be thin, because that's going to make sure that it's quick, right, and permeable. It must be able to pass through. So you want those two things to go hand in hand, passing through quickly. the surface must be moist. And very important, oxygen must dissolve into the moistness because oxygen needs to form a solution. If it doesn't form a solution, nothing is going to happen. Okay, a good transport system. What did we mean by transport system? Guys, I need to get oxygen to the body, and I need to get carbon dioxide to the lungs. So I need to transport them around the body, and I'm going to do that if I have an efficient, for us, blood. Other organisms might have a different way. They might not necessarily need to use it. For some organisms, it needs to be well protected. If it's not, if it causes damage, obviously we're not going to be able to get that oxygen and the carbon dioxide in. So that's well protected. And again, it all depends on the organism. I won't say how important is the organism, it's going to depend on the structure. Now this concept of well ventilated. What does ventilated mean? It's another word for breathing, but we can't use the word breathing because some organisms don't breathe. And oxygen and ventilation means simply how can I must get a way that oxygen can come into, the organism, and carbon dioxide must get out of. So each time that we're looking at, whenever we're looking at a gaseous exchange surface, those are the pointers that you need to look at each time. Right, have a little summary where you summarize to make sure that is going to happen. Right, so guys, then what we looked at how gaseous exchange needs to occur and how it occurs differently for different organisms. And as we said, organisms are different sizes, organisms are different shapes, they've got different body coverings, some live in water, some live on land, and how they get the oxygen in is going to be different. Structure versus function, right? We might need to tweak it. How am I going to get that oxygen in? Now, the first thing you looked at the leaf, and here it wasn't necessarily that you had to go and study the whole leaf again. Just understand how does it enable gaseous exchange. And the important parts when it came to, as I said to you there, I've put in the corner, understand how the leaf, is able to do all of those. How is it thin and permeable? So as I said, little things. You don't need to know the leaf, but know that the palisade tissue is going to be thin, and it also has a large surface area. Ventilation, what do we have at the bottom over here? We have stomata, which are holes in which allows, a little bit differently, oxygen to go out here and carbon dioxide to go in, because why? We need to have this whole process of photosynthesis. These air chambers over here are nice and moist. When it comes to a leaf, we're not going to be that well protected, but how is it able, to undergo gaseous exchange? And you looked at the leaf as well when you looked at photosynthesis. The earthworm. You looked at the earthworm when you looked at the concept of, animal biodiversity. What does the earthworm have? The earthworm is nice and moist, the skin. It has all these blood vessels that can transport. So again, just this understanding, not the knowledge of the earthworm, but how does it, tick the boxes of a gaseous exchange surface. Then you looked at the example of a fish, and a fish lives in water, and because it lives in water, it needs to be able to have a different mechanism in which it can take, oxygen in and out, and that is where we looked at the whole concept of the gills. We looked at insects. We looked at insects again when we looked at the whole concept of animal biodiversity, but here we see that insects have a little hole, a little spiracle, and we actually see for the first time a far more involved, a far more intricate ventilation system called the tracheal system that gets the oxygen in and out. So we actually, right, see not only diffusion, but that actually has to work through a way, which then led us to the whole concept of the mammals. And there we looked at how our body, right, is able, and we're going to look at the lungs, how it, right, tick the boxes for all of those, right, requirements of a gaseous exchange surface. Guys, just a quick question that I've put up on the board here, right? It's not too difficult. It says the diagram below refers to two simple water organisms, Hydra and a planaria. And again, you just would have been familiar with them when we look at animal biodiversity. And it says here, both consists of only 2 layers of cells. So what could I ask here? It says, define the processes by which gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide, move between the surrounding water. Okay, it doesn't say name, it says define. And that process, if you have a look at over there, is diffusion. And because it is diffusion, you need to define it. And it's the movement, here, movement of gases from a high concentration, I'm just going to write there, to a low concentration. I didn't ask for the process, I asked for a definition. So please make sure that's really important that you understand that concept. Right. Why is it easier for terrestrial organisms to exchange gases? Right. The reason being is oxygen is more readily available. Remember, guys, there's less oxygen per volume in the water, so they have to have a very different method, and organisms and land are able to get more oxygen in, and here we have to have different organs. The last question, for which metabolic process is oxygen required? Why do all metabolic, all right, well, how does our body work? What do we need it for? And that would be cellular respiration. So you see, in the beginning, when we have to know the differences between those terms, they also are able to interact. Okay, I think we just need a little bit of a break, and we're going to be right back.